Very much, Michael, for that, and we'll go right into our conversation on Kenya Airways. I'd like to ask you, CS, conditions for the bailout. Clearly, you know, Kenyan shareholders, aviation experts, everybody's saying if the government has to bail out KQ, we need to know what the government will ask for in return.
Definitely, we have to clearly assess what has caused this, and I just mentioned a few causes of these huge losses. We would not want to just sink money again. You know, as you know, we are also dealing with the challenges in Mumias, and now we have this Kenya Airways. We would like to get clearly a turnaround plan, and that really we are expecting that as soon as possible. We are engaging management to get that turnaround plan, which will form the basis for us on how we go forward in terms of our participation in equity injection, and also the loans that they may require for the longer term. Because as a business now, we know very clearly that KQ cannot go out there and borrow long term because of their financial situation as it is now. So obviously, as the government, we are looking this to be a very critical strategic asset, and we obviously will have to play our role to ensure that the airline turns around and goes back to full profitability as soon as possible.
How much money are you looking at here for a bailout?
I think preliminary numbers that we have, seen, which we are yet to be finalized, is that we are looking at the tune of something like 600 million US dollars, and may go up there depending on, the full assessment of the requirements that they will need. But those are figures that are already emerging. And we are looking at what of that will be equity injection, what shareholders will have to come in. Obviously, we have principal shareholders, the government, we have KLM, we have others, and also all shareholders would like to participate, because definitely the airline needs equity now. And then what ratios are we looking at for the debt that they might take? So obviously they need equity also to leverage on the debt. So we are now looking at what would be the right composition for that, depending on their business turnaround strategy that we will all agree to finance.
Is there a likelihood that the government might increase its shareholding?
Well, it may turn out to be that way if other shareholders do not participate in this turnaround strategy. Obviously, every shareholder needs to participate, or you will be sort of, diluted in a way, and government will take up more.
Let me add something as a sweetener for the CS to give that 60 billion shillings for the short term. By 2018, Kenya will have a capacity of close to 30 million passengers. With the completion of the Greenfield terminal. Currently, we are doing about 7 million. Now, and Kenya Airways, they are doing about 4 million of the 7 million currently. So 2018, we have a capacity of 30 million passengers. We are doing 7 million now. And it's unlikely, even in the current trends, that we are going to reach anywhere even to about 40% of the available capacity by 2018. So I think, I guess that's another way of ensuring that there is a valid case to get Kenya Airways with a short-term facility, and then of course everything that comes around with it, including, if possible, restructuring management. Relooking at their asset financing, debt financing. So yes.
Chris, what would you as a shareholder like to see in terms of, should the government give out a bailout, a lifeline, so to speak, to Kenya Airways? What sort of conditions would you think the government should give?
I don't think the conditions are the real issue. I think what we have to do is really go in there and interrogate the total management. See that we have skilled, experienced people. See that we have the right policies. See that we have empowered workers. And see that we have strong marketing arms to be able to sell Kenya Airways. I think we used some time ago to be very up the game when we were saying Kenya is our pride of Africa. You know, when I entered Kenya Airline, you feel proud. We need to do that. We need to get back to that level of commitment. And two, we need to protect Kenya Airways. I think this open policy everywhere, I think is wrong. We also need to make sure, Mr. CS, the security situation in the airports is well taken care of so that Kenya Airways can fly to America. America is a big continent, and a lot of people who come to Kenya, they buy their tickets through KLM. And in Amsterdam, KLM prefers to book these people on their chartered planes and not on the new 787 Kenya Airways. So Kenya Airways flight will come half empty and KLM flight will be totally full. So this kind of disorganized marketing strategy, it does not work. Yet we have directors, we have all these guys who sit there. What is their role? What are they doing to protect our investment?
How protective can the government be in a free market, so to speak?
Well, just to add on that, I think really it is very important that we look at Kenya is now to begin to focus on what they want to achieve, what market they want to, the niche market that they have the opportunity to dominate and play a big role. You know, you mentioned earlier about the Project Mawingo, which was the whole idea that was led to the acquisition of all these fleets, which now has not happened because of the routing. You know, we have not been able to fly the long distance that we are talking about. And all these are areas that we, of course, it was expected at that time. By now, maybe we should have, you know, flights to US, to China, or to Tokyo, and all that. You know? So the acquisition of the flights were meant to match that routing, but that has not happened. So you find yourself they have the fleets which cannot fly those routes, and they cannot fly the other routes because they are not economical, and they either end up to be, you know, packed for or now being disposed. So the strategic, you know, decisions on that were also probably needed people to know what are the plan B if these things don't happen. I think probably the board may just have gone full blown and say this is where we want to take KQ, without probably, you know, reassessing and say what if we don't achieve that, and this is what has happened now.
In that case, CS, will the management be held responsible?
I think yeah, to some extent, and of course, you know, board makes the strategic decision about you know, where the airline should go. I think probably at that particular point in time it was necessary to make such a decision. You probably don't want to blame them at that point when things goes wrong, but you also ought to have had a plan B, and maybe you should have sequenced that strategy in a manner that you don't bring the airline in this situation now, because you went full blast and implemented that. I think that strategy probably was relevant, but needed a sequencing or a phasing in a way that you actually take what you can do. But you know, to get all these fleets and then all of a sudden you are just stuck with them, you don't have. I think it would have been safe. My phase one of implementing this strategy is this, until I'm sure that I get the routes. I think those are the implementation may have a problem, and certainly yes, it also raises question about the capacity of the management team to have looked at how to implement such a strategy, and this is where we want also to see, are there challenges in that area, and what can be done.
And actually that is where I'm personally worried about the advice they are getting from the financial sector, cost versus revenues, because you cannot spend what you don't have and what you don't project to make. And if you project to make, you better be 80% sure that you are going to make. Buying one of these planes is not small money, it's not pocket change, it's a lot of money. What was motivating the management to order so many planes ahead of demand? That, to me, is very serious. But I have also another point I learned from Ethiopia and other people who have succeeded. All travel agents in some of these countries have to sell more than 50% the national airline. Failure to do that, they lose their license. Here, the agencies hardly sell 30% of Kenya Airways. And that, to me, is the root cause of the local travel people from the country. And of course, they have KLM taking the cream on the other side. So they are besieged. We must have strategic business importance, and we must have in that board people who understand business, not people who read books and went back home and now they want to practice what they read. It is to have people who have made money or who have lost money to understand where the shoe pinches.
All right, as we wind up, Arjun, and then I'll take some final comments.
One point that Chris just now made, adding to it. Kenya Airways is in the business of taking a person from A to B in a thing called an aircraft. That's their business. That's their, they have a seat. They are not in the business of derivatives. They're not in the business of hedging, fuel hedging. Leave that to the professionals, right? In fuel hedging, up to date, Kenya Airways has lost 15 billion shillings. Right? Someone needs to take responsibility for that. You're not in that business. Concentrate on business that you're in, right? Even in cargo, give cargo to someone else. As far as you're concerned, you're in passenger. You're not in handling, you're not in cargo, you're not in derivatives, you're in the service of a passenger airline.
And you remember Mr. Leeson, who made a bank go bankrupt in Europe, right? He went hedging on stocks. This is the same thing. When you try to play cash and you try to play prices, you have no role to play prices.
That's not
you buy when you can, what you can, and charge your cost based on the known factors. You cannot assume that next year the price will be X. How do you know? You are not Saudi Arabia.
All right, I'd like to take some final thoughts, perhaps starting with you, CS. Are you hopeful that KQ will turn around?
Yes, I am, and we are now really reassessing again the future of KQ and our partners and our strategic interests going forward. I think for a long time we just left the airline to run on their own, left the management to drive. Probably we as government now, we need to be more involved about the future of the airline, and that is why the aviation policy is also important as we look at that. And obviously we know the strategic importance of this asset, and we would not like to hear that we don't have a air carrier. So our long-term strategy with the airline is solid, but we need now to how do we implement these long-term plans and get out of the current situation and look at what has brought us where we are, and just focus on getting things again back to normal. It will require restructuring the balance sheet, the debts that they have acquired, replacing those with sort of longer term cheaper financing. It may require management, a team, which also now I must say the CEO is really very zealous to make sure that the airline turns. But we also need to show the entire team or the whole management is geared towards that, including even what they said about the pilots and all that. There is no way you can still continue to demand higher salaries while you are other competitors. By the way, according to the statistics that we see, is that actually the cost structure of KQ with the wage bill is among the highest. Because of this very fact that has been said. So those are some of the things that have to be fixed. Management team together with management team involves also the pilots and everybody working there. They must now begin to say that they need this airline for their survival also. So these are the things that we have to bring everybody on board. We will play our role as a principal shareholder to ensure that the airline will reassess also other principal shareholders and whether they buy into our long-term strategy about this and what can they participate in this long-term strategy.
All right, and of course we hosted Mbuvi Ngunza some time back in studio, and he actually mentioned that they are borrowing to pay the salaries. What are your final thoughts, Arjun?
What I would say is, try and convince the CS. We've got a young bunch of politicians currently, obviously forward thinking, and we need to take a cue from similar scenarios in other parts of the world. And going back to the earlier time when we mentioned American Airlines after 9/11, the SARS, so we need to take all that and learn from that. And it's a fantastic brand. There is no doubt. Yes, people will complain about non-delivery of services, etc. But that initial injection, but it must not be seen with blinkers on. It's not only that money. There is other things that needs to be done simultaneously. Just one additional issue which sort of goes against traditionally government involvement in commercial enterprises. That's days gone by. Tends not to work. So that needs to be, that's a challenge, because the more government gets involved, due to the nature of how government operates, those are challenges.
The more politics.
The politics comes into it, the tribal issues come into which Chris alluded to. But I'm quite positive. I think with that little bit of luck, but it's not just money given. We need to look at some fundamental issues that's currently prevailing in Kenya Airways internally.
Chris, your final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is that first is to remove apprehension of many people who feel government taking control of an institution. Government today is the largest shareholder of KCB, and they can play any role. But government has allowed KCB to become one of the most profitable banks today in Kenya. The turnaround of KCB, we saw it, and government has supported KCB, and KCB is a big glaring example of success. Two, we need to make sure that we support the airline. Whether all Kenyans have to pay a small tax, save Kenya Airways, our pride of Africa, we will be willing to pay some taxes, including all these banks which are making super profits. They can pay a windfall on all these big profits, so that we all have a nationalistic approach. We save this airline which supports farmers to export their commodities, which saves the tourist industries in bringing tourism, and which saves the business to be able to bring people to come here and do business in Kenya, and to take businessmen from Kenya to go and do business in other places. You can imagine if we have to rely on Ethiopian Airlines to come and take us to go and compete with them, some markets where they want to be. They will not come. They will charge us a huge price. But finally, Kenya Airways must be sensitive in their prices, their tickets. Their tickets are some of the most expensive because they are trying to cover their inefficiency and they put it on the passengers. They must allow passengers to flock into use of Kenya Airways and not to go through Dubai, to go to London, and to go to all manner of places. And finally, we must limit some of these open sky policies, allowing some planes to come here 5 times, and we don't get equal partnership. You know, the balance of trade between countries. I think we need to look at this. If we are sending people to Dubai on the Emirates, how many of those are on Kenya Airways? We must start talking to each other and balance fair sharing the load. And Mr. CS, you want more? Me, I'm ready to, out of the camera, to discuss with you. I don't want to be shot at night because I'm advocating very radical issues, but there is no other way. We must save Kenya Airways. All
right. Thank you so much. And with that, we've come to the end of this discussion. I'd like to thank my panelists, CS for Treasury, Henry Rotich. Thank you so much for joining us. Arjun Druzaik, an aviation entrepreneur. And one day we'll need to call you to tell us about the story of OneJet One. And of course, Chris Kirubi, shareholder, businessman, who has been telling us more about his thoughts on how KQ can be saved going forward. We'll take a short commercial break. We'll be back to wind up the Citizen Business Center.